Hey everybody, welcome back to another Cosmonarchy cast. We are looking at another set of matches between Aeud64 and Krankendau. This Terran versus Zerg match, at least I'm expecting it to be Terran this time and not Protoss, from Aeud, is going to be interesting. We're going to be on Blackwater Bastion for 3 games. Let's see what happens. Indeed, Aeud is going to be in the top left as the... We'll come back to that color in Terran, of course, and Krankendau. Over here, I'm going to say this is... Oh man, this actually could be maroon, but I'm going to say blood. Yeah, of course, it's blood. Now, this color is interesting, because in Cosmonarchy, we've got over 100 player colors, so it's really fun for me to start off every match, as long as I remember. I'm not, like, immediately tossed into the deep end where I'm talking about some really exciting detail about the game and how, oh yeah, it's really cool that this player did that in the last game, and what could he have done differently and stuff. I get excited about the game, it makes sense. I am the lead designer after all, but that's something that definitely comes up. And when I'm not already down there, I do like to, take a look at these player colors and try to imagine what they are. But this one I am coming up short. I am coming up short. I don't think we even have a peach color. Maybe we do, actually, but this isn't it. And then I think peach is a little bit more yellow than this. Slightly more yellow. And that's really the only color that I could think of that could even fit the bill. So, bronze, of course. Well, yeah, I definitely would never have gotten that in a million years. So, Aeud is the bronze Terran. I'm sure he's going to do better than that name suggests. And the Krankendau opener of going pool into Kagrant. So I guess this isn't really the Krankendau opener. This is the Art of Turtle opener. Maybe Crank is someone who has experimented with this, but the first time I saw it used in any sort of competitive context, or really even at all, was indeed it was the Royal Invitational of May, and we had Art of Turtle, Krankendau, and Ecalypso all in Group A of that event. And Krankendau and AOT duked it out in a ZVZ matchup, and AOT did this build. He did Pool and then Larvosk. So that was really neat. And we have a bio opener here for our Terran player, with the Maverick going to shoo away this Droleth. In fact, as long as Krankendau responds quickly enough, yeah, he's actually going to be able to save that, I think. You can stim after it. It's kind of not mapped out if that's good or not. The only time you would really have to worry about losing the Maverick in the early game is if we're getting 7-pulled or something, and on a 4-spot map, that's really unlikely. So maybe it is always worth it to stim after the worker and try to kill it. I do think that you can make it happen, and you're probably not going to end up losing the Maverick to something else, so, that's probably fine. The main reason why you want to scout your opponent this early with a worker, for those wondering, sometimes we get a bunch of new people in here who have never really seen that much about Cosmonarchy before. The reason why you scout with workers is because, you don't have an Avaleth, you don't have an Overlord, so you have to go for the worker scout. And the reason why you want to scout Terran, because really all he got there was, he went for, bio, right? But you don't have to go bio first. In Cosmonarchy, you can just build a Fulcrum, the factory, and you don't need a stockade first. So, as a result, it's good to know what exact unit composition you might be facing, and so that always helps. I mean, there's 50 units per race on average, so you're talking about, the fact that you can make 5 units out of the stockade at any given time. Once you throw down an add-on, it's 3 units before then. And there are 2 different add-ons, so it's 7 total units that are available from the stockade, potentially. And this fast Avaleth here is going to allow the Kagrant to be, moved over and then turned into some anti-surface defense. That will allow Krankendau to take a quick natural. He is, however, building a decent number of Quasilisks, and I wondered for a second if he wasn't going to use that Avaleth to drop his opponent. We actually immediately see Aeud transitioning his ground army, the ground army that targets air anyway, up here in case the drop was going to come there. But instead, it sort of split the difference, right? It threaded the needle. And so now, not sure if there's a bunch of units in here waiting to drop and unload. Aeud is definitely going to be fairly watchful. But as the stim pack expires, he's actually gone for 1 of each add-on, so we will end up seeing a diaspora of Terran units, so I'm probably going to go ahead and assume it's going to be, obviously we see the Eidolons here, I'm assuming Clerics after, yep. The reason why you would expect Clerics here is because they are a lot more economic on one base. Aeud does have a decent amount of workers, thanks to his quarry. He does not really have a natural incoming, though. He's going to go ahead and drop it now, and it will be a treasury, so that's a little bit different. So the treasury, when you go treasury versus ministry, you go treasury. Oh, I like this. There's more to talk about here. You go treasury for the faster expansion, and you get less workers through that because it doesn't train workers like the Ministry does. However, you can put an add-on on it. It has the same add-ons as the Ministry, so you can just do that. Now this Avaleth slips back in, and it will reveal that there are indeed Eidolons. There's also a Shaman popped out. He may or may not have seen the treasury go down. I don't think he did. Now over here, his Avaleth will end up being destroyed. And because there are Eidolons present, that's actually kind of a big deal. So Krankendau went for this interesting play, right? Where he went for a fast Zorkiz on one base. He postured like he was going to attack with, going to expand. And it looks like maybe he's thinking about doing it now. But I look at this and I think to myself, no, what Krankendau has been doing here is amassing a much higher, much faster army, much higher tech army than you would normally see this early on in the game. We've got a Gorg, we've got a couple Zoryus, and that's interesting, right? When I looked over at his base and said, oh, there's something to say here, that's because he wasn't actually making the natural Hacharosk, right? That's kind of a pretty big deal. The Gorg is going to fly over, maybe stick itself onto the mineral line. It'll reveal the anvil in construction, and now with the Shaman deployed, it's going to go ahead and act as a detector. That's what that rotating thing in the top is. We'll improve the models and stuff over time, so if you see anything that looks a little out of whack, feel free to let us know, but we've probably considered it. Now, here comes the attempt at attacking forward. The Quasis are the firing line. There's a single Achizalisk here. There is detection in the form of the Shaman. Remember that Aoud going for the expansion and then for the anvil? He does not actually have the craziest army count right now. The Gorg has died. The Zoryus, when it attacks, it allows other ground units for the Zerg to move forward a lot faster and really sick onto the enemy. And now falling back to try to benefit from the Shaman detection, well, that's not going to go any further. The Eidolon's getting focused down by the Quasilisks. There's not much here left for Aoud. He's got an anvil nearly completed the Morningstar, but other than that, he's really just rocking the Eidolon. And yeah, they've fallen over, right? So no real support there. He does have a couple Harakans coming. He is going to end up losing some workers, but I think this Lakizalisk wasn't in the fight, right? The follow-up attack is what I'm worried about. The only thing is that Krankendau didn't seem to be making military units until just about now. So yeah, that's an interesting fight. There was a lot going on in that fight where the fact that Aoud had a lot of healing was really, really good until the sustained fire from the Quasis came out. And so that was actually a pretty big deal. So yeah, I think he's realized. I saw him select it or whatever, and he was like, "Yeah, okay, that's dead." I did not pull it back. I did not do a good job with that one. So he's popping on back, but that overall he should feel okay about that attack. He did reduce the worker count pretty significantly, and here's something that I like about what Krankendau has done, because obviously he attacked. And then he made a lot of workers behind the attack, which meant that he couldn't go for the jugular. There was an opening there for him to just kill Aoud. So instead of going for the jugular later, right, and being like, okay, I have gone ahead and attacked him, and I've almost killed him, so now it's time for me to kill him with a follow-up attack. Instead of doing that, he just went even harder into the worker count. The economics of it. He's now leading by 15 workers. So that is considerable. And that's something where I think Krankendau has realized my window of killing him is probably going to close before my army gets across the map again. And so instead, I'm just going to upgrade my infrastructure by adding more Larvosks. So now I have 5 larva production every so often. And yeah, you can see this Eidolon confusedly walking over here and thinking, wait, where's the expansion? Yeah, there is no third base up yet, which is a little unorthodox, a little surprising. We've got 3 Gorgs coming and 3 more already on the field. Third base now coming online here for Aoud. Remember, his worker count is kind of suffering right now. He only has 2 worker production, so that's a pretty big deal. He's going to transfer a bunch of workers down to his third base. The transfer rate for Cosmonarchy is a bit different. You want to keep 2 times the mineral field workers on the mineral fields at any given time for full saturation. So that means we have a standard in competitive maps so far has been 8 mineral fields per main, or per base really. But you can go down to 6 sometimes, or you can go around, right? But in the mains and naturals and often thirds, it's often just here it is, right? So the Morningstar is painted a target for, and that is. It's probably going to go ahead and cancel the hatch. I don't know that Krankendau will be able to spot that. You can hear the little banter sounds there as the structure has indeed been reduced to rubble. So 6 Gorgs, 7 Zoryus, and the lake is. So this is very interesting. I love the ant seal protecting the basin while while it repairs the quarry. I heard something. I wonder what that something was. Now, there's not really that much chaff, right? That's a bit of a concern. Okay, the Atlas is indeed popped off in the top left. That's going to be tier 2. I think the Morningstar was remade. So we're going to have another attempt at going for that. There's some Zeths around that can definitely help out. And Aoud has to be careful, because if he goes too close to any units or structures, he will be forcibly decloaked. And that does include... Okay, he's going to paint the Larvosk here. I'm not sure that he's aware of where it is. Oh, there you go. He'll find him. Oh, but he looked away. He looked away a little bit too quick. Yeah, that's going to be a dead Larvosk, and probably this one as well due to the radiation clouds. Now, thankfully for... Oh, no. Oh, God. Oh, jeez. Oh, golly. Oh, man. Well, it's okay. The radiation doesn't deal that much damage, but still. That's not ideal, shall we say. That was a pretty good double nuke right there. It fully kills the Larvosk. No, it saves itself with 2 HP. Dude, nerf Zerg. What the hell? And obviously it killed the Kagran underneath it and a bunch of Zeths and stuff, so that worked out. I was going to say, right, Krankendau doesn't have that much chaff. So Aoud seemingly just getting out of jail with the moves that he's done. To me, it feels kind of like where the... this game is kind of gotten out of hand here, where Krankendau had a pretty big advantage for a good while. He's dropping his tier 2 now. Not all intents and purposes, not the latest tier 2 for Zerg relative to the Terrans, but we're already seeing captaincies and a starport. So this looks to me like Aoud's game for sure, if it continues in the trajectory that it's continuing. Because Krankendau had the military advantage for so long in this game, but he's been sort of moved around, right? And I don't know where that nuke actually is. I can't quite see any place it could be. Was it just a random... It surely wasn't just a random nuke. Yeah, he literally just randomly nuked to make him panic. Okay, I was really confused by that. So, you know, I don't know if that's worth 100, but maybe. Maybe the psychological damage is worth it. Tinker's Tower's being added on. Okay, so our boy thinks about something here. He's got Apostles out as well. I guess thinking about it, like Apostle plus your own frontline units is really, really good right now. Eventually that'll be more of an autocrat role because the Apostle is going to be more about reclaiming units that are around it. I've already talked a little bit about the changes that are going to be impending to Reclamation. 4th base now on the way here. All treasuries. Now, remember that what I said about the treasury thing is that it's tempo over the ministry. The worker count very low for Aoud. He only has the 3 worker production queues, this quarry and the 2 in the main. The fact is, like, he's not really going for a heavy economic play. He's just kind of going for tempo. And I feel like now that Krankendau has tier 2 tech on the way, he's going for the Spire, for the Den, which is a tier 1 structure, but he's making it now, and of course the Nest. So we're looking at all of this stuff that's going on, that's popping off in his base. And, oh, look at that. Actually disrupting this treasury from being finished. But even without the treasury itself, like, the fact is, ministries take way longer to kill. So, the fact that this is the way that it is definitely looking favorable for Krankendau to at least harass him and heckle him. But I wouldn't want him to do a head-up fight right now, right? That's a concern. A single Apostle in the back. The Gorgs can't really get onto them without going through all of the stimmed Mavericks, but maybe that's okay for now. You can see that the Apostles are busy attacking stuff on the left. They are going to start taking over the Zoryus a little bit. And the workers on the right, yeah, they are going to be shot down as well. But I was mostly worried about potentially reclaiming the Gorger cores in that fight. And there you go. Some Striga have swatted that Ovoleth out of the sky. Now, the Eidolon count is also rising, and I didn't really get managed in that fight, right? So there's a lot of Eidolons, right? There's 9 of them out on the field right now. There's 1 more being made every rotation. So that's kind of interesting. Then we've got the... Let's see, the circuits, the... Okay. All right, I'm seeing something here, for sure. Where all the static defense is set up, the 4th base is set up. And we have a little bit of map vision elsewhere on the map. So Krankendau isn't in a horrible position. He also is realizing that maybe if he goes for the Convolisks, the Vilgoricors, the Zoryus, that can really screw up the Apostles, because they'll end up wasting their revives, their reclamations, on the Brood Spawn, or on, chaff, melee units or whatever. And it won't be nearly as effective. So I actually do quite like that. We do have the Protathalors out for sniping, but there's only 2 of them right now. So you usually, I go to a step farther than some other people. I think you need Protathalors, and you need to put them on a separate control group even, so you can just precision strike people. Especially since there's only the one Apostle, right? That's actually a really prime target here. And it is going to reduce the level of power that the Reclamation can provide. But at the same time, right, Aoud is... he's mostly putting his eggs in other baskets, I think. He's got some very, very nice sustained DPS, and then the longer the fight goes on, the Madcaps are upgraded Mavericks in a way, you can kind of think of them as. Instead of stimming to get their attack speed boost, they stand still, and every time they shoot while standing still, they gain attack speed, right? So it's like a stand your ground kind of unit. And that's sort of Castle Doctrine, if you want to call it with that, which maybe could have even been their passive name, but it's actually a mythological reference instead. Oh, some of his units might get caught here on the bottom. This is an opportunity for you to jump directly on the split here and see what you can do. Many more infantry units, the Bio Ball here, charging forward. We don't really see that much firepower in Krankendau's army. It's all about sustain. He's going to drop another Vilgaleth on the front lines and see what he can do to just use the Carapace Swarms from the Vilgoricors to kind of cover everything else. The moneymakers right now are his Convolisks. More Protathalors coming as well to see what they can do for damage. But the front line is starting to fall, starting to falter, and as it breaks, this whole force is going to need to fall away. The Seraph channeling Irradiate. There's really not that much left on the front line. We have some Lakizelisks here, but it feels like they're way too little, way too late. At the very least, there's no more Reclamation coming out. So that one ends up working out nicely. But Krankendau is going to have to call GG, and that's a game where he was very much favored in the early stages of the match, and he kind of allowed himself to get run around by the Bioforce. He didn't necessarily have the crowd control. I loved the Convolisks, and you could see that it was working. It's just, if he had moved those Lakizelisks further forward, or if he had them at the right time a little bit earlier, that fight probably goes much differently. There was almost no front line, actually, for Aoud. The front line that he had were the Strigas and the Harakans, and, I guess to some extent the Clerics if they were on the front line healing. But there wasn't really that much going on there. There was only the one Apostle. That army was not as strong as maybe it might have looked on paper. And so I feel like Krankendau had a really great chance of getting a little bit deeper into that fight and extending play. But that will be our first game of the video. Headed on over to Aoud's side. Gotta hand the victory to him if he earns it. And we are back for the second game in just a moment. So the top half of the map was where we were last time. Now we're on the bottom half. Krankendau, the Blood Zerg in the bottom right. Aoud, the... Oh man, what color is this? Is this Tyrian purple? I feel like Tyrian purple is a little bit darker than this. We'll say Tyrian purple anyway. It's Palatinate purple. Okay, all right. Well, you know what? There's not that many purples there, so I kind of just took a gamble. So far, I'm only guessing Krankendau's colors for now. We'll see if I can guess Aoud's in the next game. This is game number 2. So in the last game, Krankendau had a really nice military advantage, courtesy of skipping his expansion and going straight into a Zorkish Shroud after feigning that he was taking his natural. In this game, I don't know that Aoud is going to fall for that trick, but I also don't even know if Aoud is aware of that trick, right? Because you could theoretically put down the hatch and then just use it for extra larva production for military and not make any workers out of it, not do any transfers and anything like that. So maybe that's what he thought happened, or maybe he wasn't even necessarily keeping track, of the work that Krankendau was doing. So, these are thoughts. It will be another pool into Larvosk here for Krankendau. I am curious to know if Aoud is like, or I don't know. I'm wondering how all the different players, Aoud for Terran, Krankendau for Zerg, Ecalypso or Hit 'em Up or whoever else for Protoss. I wonder how many builds they actually have. It does feel right now that Krankendau's Zerg is leading the charge, right? We do need more Terrans and more Zergs so that we can get a little bit more variety in there. And, there's the thought, right? Because we have a Fulcrum opener here, so we're going to see what I was talking about earlier. You can just go mech, and it's going to be the one Vulture Quarry option here for now as the 2 Worker Scout continues. And for my money, right? Like, it looks like we really have two options for Zerg in general. We've got Pool before Larvosk, or we have Larvosk before Pool as the direct opener, and then it kind of opens up. Like you can take your Expo, you can go for a tech, you can, you know, do something cheesy. So there's a couple of different things that you can do, right? As the Drolith is going to go ahead and get up the ramp this time, but it will also be put out. Now, if I'm Aeud, I'm thinking about sharking upwards towards the Scout Worker that I've seen, but the Quasis are going to be in here to ward off the Vulture, so he'll probably grab it, you know, eventually. Yeah, I think he's already sort of cheating over there. Yeah, he wants to meet it over in this neck of the woods, which is pretty cool. So he's thinking the same thing I'm thinking about. This is the guaranteed worker kill here. And punishing Krankendau for doing the 2-worker scout, which, you know, I understand why Krankendau's doing it. So it's not even like a bad thing per se. But yeah, anyway, interesting stuff. Like, what are the openers for Terran? It seems like it's, you know, Fulcrum Quarry or it's Stockade Quarry. There are more openers than that, but people have mostly just kind of stuck to the same thing. And so it's going to be interesting to see what more people can do there. So the Quasi step forward, show their count, and execute the Worker Scout. That is going to result in some mine laying here from Aeud's Vultures. Let's see what happens with the Ovaleth coming up online. That feels like maybe it's going to be moving that Kagrant out for anti-surface. Now, versus the Vultures, you do want to get rid of the... You want to get rid of attack paths where possible. That's one way to put it. And another way to put it is that you can sip coffee as long as you get coffee donations. Money. All right, expansion coming for both players. The Ovaleth is going to go ahead and scout. There are 4 Vultures here. They can snipe this, but it looks like they were a little bit too slow. And once it gets finished, it's a lot harder to actually end up going the way of the dodo when you're facing off against Vultures. Another bird. There's a lot of birds. You know, I know that, like there's a problem that I have with naming units, right? And that problem is I really don't like stuff that's sort of generic and cliche. Oh, this will be interesting. I think this Ovaleth is indeed dead, yeah. Shout out to the Goliath, the powerhouse of the Terran. Oh, and still no Expo actually dropped here for Crank. He wanted to get his Zorkas first, it looks like, so... Yeah, that's interesting. He did scout the timing of the treasury, so he knows that it's almost done. But, you know, like, I was playing 5 Nations recently-ish. It's like one of the most... I guess that's the last RTS that I played that was set like a sci-fi RTS in... that wasn't, you know, Cosmonarchy, right? So, you know, it's got its high points and its low points, and its campaign style is definitely on the low point side. But the cool thing about it is that it has some very funny names, like Digestivator and stuff. But they also have, like, very, very generic names, like Crow, you know? And so even though Crow is, like, a cool... Like, you know, I'm a crow, like, you know? I like birds. Birds are pretty cool. I'd be a crow if I was a bird. And that's great, you know? I used to practice cawing. You know, it's great. Good time. And all in the service of this, like, one random inside joke that we've taken so far for it to now just be it's total chaos, man. Like, people call me Big Crow, Dad Crow, Caw Dad, Crow Father. So, you know, it's I think the inside jokes are becoming outside jokes at this point. Like, there's hundreds of people are aware that I am in fact a crow, and that seems a little too many people. But I still wouldn't name a unit Crow. Like, that is just not very interesting to me. I like names where there's an element of it that immediately you look at it and you think, oh, I kind of understand the essence of this unit, right? Like, you know, the idea of, for example, the Phalanx. Like, that's kind of what it is. You drop it in formation and it just annihilates your opposition and they crash upon you in a sea of blood. And that's it. That's all you got. That's the Phalanx, right? Like, that is exactly what the Phalanx is. And so that feels really thematic. You know, this whole thing that you have to, like, deploy in formation in order to get maximum vitality out of. Like, that's very epic to me. And, you know, the Estrathaleth, you know, like, you can just read Estrathaleth and you can immediately know that. All right, I can't keep that one up with a straight face. But, you know, you guys get the idea, right? It's like, the names that I go for, as long as they're not Zerg names, are supposed to have some element of it. And so I wouldn't, even though crows are cool, I wouldn't necessarily name a unit crow, like Terran crow. That just sounds silly. I know that there was the Protoss Storm Crow, which I thought was kind of funny when I was younger. And as I grew up and realized, wait, you're naming alien species after human animals? Are you fucking high, mate? Like, why would you name like this vessel for the, an alien race after, a bird that's only visible and only found on a human planet, like a planet that's not theirs, right? So, like, I mean, Kakaru or whatever is, I guess that's on Shakura, so not on whatever. Like, it's not the Bengalos from Ire. But I was just thinking, like, surely you'd find a critter or something, and you'd name yourself, like, Storm Bengalos or whatever. I mean, that's really clunky, and I wouldn't actually do that, but that would be more thematically on point, right? So it's also a balance between what is phonetically pleasing to say and sounds cool and epic and powerful, and what is just on the side of the, like, okay, this is what makes sense, right? Because, like, technically, naming every unit Enforcer and Stinger and Striker is like, okay, well, that's boring as fuck, but, like, it could make sense. It's just, you want to fuse that with, you have to marry the idea of, like, making it make sense with making it cool and fun and, epic. So, anyway, that's my name rant. Sometimes I just incorporate like podcast topics in the middle of these casts. In the meantime, while I've been doing that, the mech army is massing up. We have 4 phalanxes dropping in formation, and they are going to lay siege to this third base just as it finishes mutating. So this is the call to action. We have many, many Gorger cores and not so many anti-air units, and they are just going to utterly eviscerate the walkers in this force. They take away their attention from the Goliaths, allowing a lot of splash damage from the Cyclops as well, for that matter, but they will eventually get rid of all of the phalanxes and save the Hatrosk in the process, reducing down that mech count. Now, there's still, again, not so many. Oh, wow. I can't believe the Gorgs actually killed an air unit. That's amazing. They killed the Anseal of all things. 2 more Gorgs surviving from that force. They are going to help clean up the very low HP Goliath there. It doesn't feel like he can really do that much more. I'm sure that, he's going to end up falling there. So there's 1 Goliath left. 2 Vultures coming on in to try to pick the circuit before it finishes mutating, but that's not going to happen. We got 3 Zorius in the back. We've got the... This is definitely too much. Now, it finishes and then dies, so it doesn't even get an attack off. But now the sustained fire is going to be way too much here. You're not going to be able to deal with this force, and we even have more Gorgs coming out here. So nice scout from Aoud. What's his response behind it? He set up his own third base, but he's only got mining done. He's now put down his Atlas. He's got 4 Fulcrums and only 1 with a Palladium, so he's doing 3 Goliath, 1 Phalanx production, adding more Fulcrums in the back. Impending doom, perhaps, as Krankendau has a significant army advantage right now and has the base advantage. 3 workers advantage is not really that massive, but he's saturated the gas in the same way. And so, the worker saturation here is going to be a little bit less. Also, a significant number... Oh, getting this Phalanx caught is actually a really big deal. A significant number of Aoud's investment is actually in tech, which takes some time to pay off, right? It's like if you lose your whole army in a fight and your enemy still has an army, and then you spend most of your money on tech and more infrastructure, which is like units in the future, sure. Advantages in the future, sure. Like, aren't you just calling out on your opponent, right? Aren't you just requesting that they are the ones who attacks into you? Now, the Vulture Mines are doing an amazing amount of work here, delaying and putting out of sync the Gorger Core stack, but there's so many of them still, and they are just going to cleave through. They do deal AoE versus ground units, and they are going to deal with all of those Goliaths that were clumped up. That feels like a mistake from Aoud. And now sticking onto the workers, the workers are going to stack up and get splashed as well. We're talking about less than 12 workers all of a sudden when there are so many of them over here, and that's going to be it. The Pain Train. Great stun from that lobotomy mine, but there's only the 1 Phalanx. Sure, it's dealing, upwards of 1,000 damage right now, but the Goliaths are dead. A lot of that damage must have been to his own units anyway. We've got 3 more Goliaths storming out of the Fulcrums to try their best to deal what they can with this offending force. But Aoud, he is losing workers. They are dropping like flies. Going out down to 40, maybe less than if a couple more hits come in, but it looks like not so many. And the Zorius now charging up the ramp. They might be able to pick this Phalanx, which would just be insult to injury, as more units have been massed up and destroy that quarry. Another investment and a big loss when you're so low on workers in the first place. Now just down to a Phalanx and 4 Goliaths, many of which are wounded. Not much income. He built all these Fulcrums because he was, had a lot of money float during the battle, and now he can't use any of them because look at his worker count, look at his mining count. Sure, he's got tier 2 up, but what's he going to do with it? Captaincy coming down. He knows he has to be cost efficient. Meanwhile, a 4th base in the works here for Krankendau might not even be required. Hard to imagine how he's going to end up... I feel like there's no way that Aoud can realistically save this. He's going to go ahead and drill out with the workers, but they're just going to be susceptible to attacking. They were just mining normally, and Krankendau thought it was a drill. We've got 5 Gorgs, 2 of them just hatched. We got more on the way. That's unfortunately going to be a bit awkward here for Crank. He's going to end up losing a bunch. So that's a very expensive loss. If he had kept all 5 of the Gorgs that he just suicided in and then masked them up with the ones that he has in production, that would be a very different story, because then he can just go after the workers and really punish. Captaincy is now done. The money is very, very low right now for Aoud. He's re-adding a quarry at the 3rd base, actually. I was wondering where that was, but I'm surprised and amazed that he was able to even do that in the first place. Tinker's Tower going down for Aoud. Doesn't want to make any apostles or anything. 2nd captaincy on the way. We've got Lakizalisk, Zorius on the way. Tier 2 now completed, means that the Calcure Lake is coming. Would love to see some Calculisks here, unironically. The only concern is that if the Goliaths get free reign over them, they will drop like flies. Quarry now in jeopardy because of that 1 Zeth. Here comes another charge forward, but the Goliath count is high enough to start picking off individual Gorgs. However, the Ant Seal is completely depleted of energy, and so that is going to stop it from shielding a lot of what we see over here. Finally, that Gorg goes down, but so much splash damage was done, and the full surround here essentially means that the Phalanxes are just dealing friendly fire galore. Oh yeah, out the wazoo. None of the mech units still standing. We got 1 Goliath sort of lurking out there over the all, but we're making 4 military units a pop. GG is called. Krankendau gets on the board, and we can treat this like a legitimate best of 3. Can you believe that? Let's find out what happens in game number 3. It's only fitting that for the last time between these 2 players today, we are going to get cross spawns. We've gotten both horizontal spawn configurations, but now, Aoud in the top right, he's the bronze. He's bronze, and Krankendau as the blood Zerg in the bottom left. Very nice. Very nice. We are, this is going to be interesting. I am always excited when we have that back and forth going on in the sets. It does make him more interesting to cast. Cosmonarchy is so deep and complicated. Like, I would say there's a lot of depth. I would stress the depth before I stress the complexity. We have an internal sort of edict, if you will, a maxim that you want to have depth more than you want to have complexity. Because complexity is, in many ways, it refers to the over-encumbrance that you experience as a player, or as in the context of video games anyway. And the complexity of systems and stuff, that's like, oh, how difficult is it to remember? Is there a lot of edge cases with how the system works? Depth is the term that we can use to describe the experience of what happens. Like, how many choices do you have? And of those choices, what exactly are you deciding on, based on, right? So another pool versus another pool, Larvosk. And we're going to see an echo of the previous game where we have a Fulcrum coming up online for Aoud. And, the choices that you can make about how you can harvest Vespene from the start. How does that impact things, right? The mechanics are consistent between saturations and between mining rates and all that stuff. So you don't have to remember 2 separate mining rates like you did in Starcraft 1. You don't have to, put a structure on it in order to harvest it from it at all. However, if you do put a structure on it, then you're increasing it and upgrading it, capping your nodes. That's a topic we talk about in Tier 2 games and Tier 3 games when they go long is, how much gas were they leaving on the table by not capping. And all in all, we're going to see another double worker kill opener here, I believe. Oh, maybe not. I'm not sure if he clocked it. It looks like, the Vulture is indeed on the way over here. So Krankendau will be hunted yet again, losing 2 workers in the early stages. And this is interesting, too. This is something I've never seen anybody else do, so... You can reveal burrowed units by standing on them, so that ends up being something that's... a bit funny. However, by burrowing, he actually canceled the attack order from the Vulture because it wasn't an attack move, it was like attack unit. And then he lost vision of it for a second, but the Mason was still following a movement command. So. Alright, well, he may have lost him. Quasis are standing guard. And yeah, you know what? At this point, I think Aoud realizes I need to see if I can get any pressure done. But he charges forward. He's going to take a heckling from the high ground Quasis. You get +2 weapon range when shooting down a cliff in Cosmonarchy, so there's no random chance to miss or anything. Any of that garbo. Get that out of here. Get that out of my competitive game. Now, these mine hits could be money. We'll see how they end up going. I think, overall, that there's going to be... Yeah, I was going to say, that's going to be a pretty big hit. Now we're at the point where you can one-shot these quasis, but you do have to watch out. The Worker Scout here to repair absolutely can be a pretty big deal here. Thinking about maybe laying some more mines, but doesn't want to do it just yet. A 4th Vulture on the way. Got a Goliath sauntering on over as soon as it pops out of the production queue. And just 1 Fulcrum right now. The Quarry out here to pump out the more additional workers. Yeah, we'll have to see what the play is. Because right now, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing that Aoud is going to have a bit of a military advantage for now. And for Krankendau, who's popping out the Obeleth to move this Kagrant down, he's just going to be... His current objective is just to expand. He wants to expand. I think he wants to do so before putting down his Zorkas. Because he's been doing that a lot overall, like the Zorkas move. But the Obeleth is also going to be very helpful for revealing the mines, so that he doesn't get mine stunned. And, you know, that's also something where I look at that and I think to myself, like, I like the mines. I think, I'm sure some people are, you know, maybe they say, like, oh, I miss the explosive mines. You know, the spider mines are really cool and all that stuff. But, yeah, something that I don't know if this works or not, but I'm pretty sure you can just drop the Kagrant on top of the mines to pop them. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure about that. Now, this is very risky. This is very, very risky. Like, losing that Kagrant is going to be a really big deal, but it looks like Aoud does not quite get it to happen. So there you go. Works out. A couple workers going to be sent down here for 1 more Kagrant and, of course, a hatch. 2nd Fulcrum being added after the expansion goes down. One thing that I feel like it would be cool is if... We're probably going to need to make a couple of adjustments to the Terran race if I do this, and I am thinking about doing this, but I think increasing the quarry cost to be a little bit more of an investment so that you don't necessarily get it super early on into the game. You can if you want, but it's going to slow you down even further. Because right now, the min-maxers of us, like Aoud and Top Ramen to some degree as well, have kind of figured out the builds, and they're kind of just sitting here like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like 1 Fulcrum, Quarry, and I'm going to have like a military advantage because the Fulcrum units end up being pretty strong, and, you know, so on and so forth, right? And that's my style. That's what I want to get done. And then I can kind of transition out of that. But as a response, they often have very low unit counts. And one of the things that we wanted to do in general was make it so that the unit counts were a little bit more in sync with each other. And there's definitely a situation where you'll be fighting against like Gateway Toss or something, and you'll have like way less units than they do by the, you know, the 6-minute mark like now. But you might have like, you know, 8 to 9, maybe 10 workers more. In certain situations. And, you know, you might have 4 worker production queues if you've gone for like a ministry expand instead of a treasury one. And so it can be like really quite crazy in terms of how much you can actually get, how much, how many workers you can actually end up getting, and how few units you can produce and still be, you know, okay. And so that can be a little frustrating when you're facing the Terran, but it also, I think, locks the Terran into a play style that is maybe a little bit not as interesting as it could be. And I would at least like to experiment with, like, what happens if, say, we adjust the Vulture a little bit so that we can justifiably reduce its mineral cost by 25 so that you're not slamming out so many minerals when you go for heavy Fulcrum usage. And then we also make it so that the Quarry takes longer to make, and maybe is more expensive, or maybe less expensive, or maybe the same, but it's just like time cost wise, it's very pricey or whatever. You know, maybe it locks out your town center from producing for 3 workers instead of 2 workers. Right now it has the same build time as 2 workers. So when you build it, you're at a deficit of 2 workers. But in this situation, nice full scout here from Krankendau as he figures out exactly what's going on, by the way. 3rd Fulcrum in production, Palladium out. He can click on structures that are being detected and see what they're making. So he may have known that there was a phalanx out there. And he's certainly aware that the natural is already up. Krankendau actually ahead in terms of workers for now. So anyway, there's a lot that would happen if you change that about the Terran race. If you reduce the ease of access to the extra worker production queue. There's a lot that would change as a result of that, a lot of knock-on consequences. But if we make that happen and it ends up being, you know, we can then tweak from that starting point, what would Terrans need to still be competitive without just getting an over-determined choice. Because I was talking about depth versus complexity earlier. And one of the hallmarkers of depth is do you have many choices that, depending on your playstyle and depending on your follow-up, could be very good? If that's the case, then you're probably talking about a game that's pretty neat. But if you have one choice that dominates all the others, or if you have a small selection of choices that fixate around a particular initial decision, like, when do you get your quarry, basically, then maybe that is a case where it's something called overdetermined, which as a concept just means that even if you took some good things away from it, it would still be a really good choice, maybe still be the best choice. It's basically like a fancy way of saying that, like, this is maybe not overpowered, but this is like relative to everything else, this is just by far and away the best choice, and it's clear. When you have situations like that, you usually want to modulate a little bit. You usually want to change some stuff up and see how you can make the experience a bit more rich and the choices a bit more meaningful. And so that's sort of where I'm coming at right now, looking and thinking about the game and considering what we're up against when it comes to so many different choices. How many of them are legit, right? And part of that is you got to figure that out by, seeing the game be played by high-level players and see the game be grinded. Very blessed to have the community that we have. So shout out to all you guys. Now, that being said, we do have a bit of a military encroachment happening. And Aeud's army has grown to a reasonable size. Obviously, a lot of it is Cyclops. So if there were Lakizelisks with this army, I'd be very scared. The Gorgs, they're going to slatter the... yeah, they're definitely going to destroy the Cyclops. But if the Cyclops can split, then the Gorgs are just dead. And the Gorgs are probably dead no matter what because of the Cyclops, actually. So it's kind of like they're locked in a bit of a lover's dance until death, and I feel like that's probably going to be how this story unfolds. Right now, I mean, especially as the Goliath count keeps increasing, the Gorgor are going to be able to do a lot less. And we don't have any Hydras or Izira cores. We certainly don't have any Lakizelisks. So it's just been mass Zor use here, a lot of mineral dumps, 7 more in production. Maybe the idea of thinking, if I can overwhelm him with the meat shields and I can spawn a lot of the Rilaro cores. He's trying to buy time. He's trying to wait for his next rotation and lure his opponent into a more surroundable location. Krankendau, those gears are turning. He's hemorrhaged a couple of Zets, but this is more than enough. He's fallen back to his choke. Also to the interior 6 position, and the Phalanxes are going to go ahead and deploy. A couple of shots across the bow. Gorgor is trying to make the engagement happen, but so many of them are indeed falling. We even have a Shaman here for healing. The flank on the left-hand side, it might be enough. Remember that the Brute Spawn are going to start being created for every single Zor to the left that's hit. And the Quasis on the right-hand side, well, they're not necessarily doing too much focus, but they are definitely doing a lot. Now the Phalanx is going to go ahead and unsiege as another wave of Zets come on in. The focus fire needs to be there on the healer units, otherwise this force is going to be deceptively tanky, especially once you get the extra armor from being in the tank mode. You're talking about sustaining through a lot of damage. Double Shaman here for healing as well, but it looks like it's finally going to be enough. The Brute Spawn stacking is ridiculous. He's got 14 of these bad boys as the mech army is eventually overwhelmed, and Aeud may be overstepping there. Thought that maybe no matter what his opponent throws at him, he's got it. But behind that, no worker damage sustained, right? I guess Krankendau didn't make workers, so there's opportunity cost, but no workers killed. We've got good saturation for 3 bases, could have better on the minerals. We could have a 4th base on the way. Looks like we will, actually. And now seeing if he can maybe heckle some of these bases, good for a good surround. Only 2 Phalanxes here, so not a crazy amount of splash damage opportunities. But a couple of forward Goliaths are going to hit the dirt nice and fast. This is where you'd want another flank of forces to come in, like similarly sized to what just stormed into the 3rd. But, no counter damage on the other side. Worker count now up by 10 here for our Terran player. So still an even game. Remember that Zerg can make up differences for workers very, very quickly. 10 Gorgor cores just got started. The Iris finishing. Not investing in a tier 2 unit just yet then. 2 more just got queued up. The Calcir Lake is coming. And yeah, I feel like you could go like 1 Vithrilisk to debuff or maybe 2 Vithrilisks, right? To debuff the ground units underneath the Ant Seal, rend their armor a little bit. You combine that with some Calculisks. I feel like that's a legit strat. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. The Vithilisk is the Devourer. The change to its passive, there's a couple of changes, but one of the main things is that when you have the acid spores, right? The corrosive spores, as they're called, the fact that they rend armor, right? And they reduce attack speed. So the Vithrilisk, when it hits a target that's already debuffed by it, and remember, it can only attack air, it will spread it radially to all units in the area, including ground units. So if you hit the ant seal once, and then you hit the ant seal a second time, that second hit is going to spread one stack of the corrosive spores around all of the other units that are in here, including the ground army. But you want to put the ant seal over your own units so they can be protected, right? So it's kind of like a competing interest there. You really don't necessarily know what to do. So we've got a lot of Gorgs. Not so many on the ground forces. Hasn't shown his hand just yet. If there's a move out, the Gorgs can swing on in and just eviscerate the worker lines. In fact, it's kind of surprising to me that the natural is so poorly saturated right now, but I believe what probably happened was that there was like a transfer at some point. But 4th base online for both players. Great worker counts for both players, both of them bordering on that triple-digit number. Ayud about to have his. And we've got a Spire, a Swamp. Both of those on the way here for our Zerg player. Capping the gas as well, so this is what I was talking about when I mentioned gas nodes. Where is the Spire being made anyway? Oh, okay, over here in the 3rd base. I was wondering what was going on. So capping the gas shuts down your gas harvesting for a little bit, and then when you get the gas node finished, you get 5 per return instead of 4, right? If we look at a regular geyser, like here, it says Vespene per return 4. So that's the key difference. And that might not sound like a big difference, but you harvest Vespene, you harvest resources in general pretty quickly. So that does add up quite fast, right? Okay, we're going to see the Phalanx Madcap combo. Very, very scary force to try to attack into, that's for sure. Because what the Phalanxes would previously struggle with, where they would maybe overkill some units and underkill others, the Madcaps can kind of finish anything off that took a lot of damage very, very quickly due to their stacking attack speed passive. A 5th base now coming online. We are seeing a bit of a split map scenario before us. 6 o'clock. Okay, that's going to be Krankendau's choice. That means that he is going to be biased towards attacking his opponent, which is fair for Zerg. Terran, on the other hand, doesn't really mind if they drag the game out a little bit longer. We've got 5 captaincies being produced right now. Apostles are indeed the weapon of choice. Okay. All right, we've got some Ramses out for crowd control as well. Yeah, very interesting. I've never seen somebody take this base as their 5th. I might have done that myself in a couple of games, but I've never seen anybody do it. A lot of Tetzoricors are here. So another thing as well with the Lyrilisks and the Tetzoricors, we talked about this in a recent cast where we saw Krankendau take on a Terran player. It might have actually been Ayud, since they've been playing a lot of games recently. But when you're fighting against the Reclamation, one of the things you can do as a Zerg player is you can go for the mutated units that, in this case, are the Lyrilisks, right? These guys, and the Tetzoricors. So the reason why you can go for that, why it's advisable, is because you essentially only leave behind a corpse of the base unit, the Quasilisk or the Aziricor. And those are significantly less powerful than the units that were mutated into. So you essentially don't, you're denying them the corpse interaction that they're hoping to get. Now, this is a very, very nice engagement here for Ayud. The Gorgakor is going to charge on in. More of them on the right-hand side. Where are the Apostles? That's the big question. It looks like some of them have already been isolated in the middle of this fight. The Lyrilisks are charging forward. We have so much sustain from the Tetzoricors. And remember, that Reclamation can't proc on them, so you can't get that sustain back. It feels like Ayud may have jumped the gun a little bit, but he has carved through the melee. The front line really just reduced to a couple of Zoryus. A Muta Horde is going to come on in, and there's not that much anti-air over here, so this army is wiped. But honestly, the fact that the front line is mostly dead, and we just have a couple of Pertathalors left, as well as, the one Teth and the couple of Zoryus, that does bode very, very well for Ayud being able to stay alive here. No base at 12 o'clock to cancel. Already behind one base right now is Krankendau. Azazels are out to defensive matrix and to kind of like focus their energies onto one particular target. The Quasi is going to reveal 3 o'clock has been taken long ago. 6 o'clock is not even halfway done, yeah. So I feel like Krankendau, even though he had a nice military victory there, he is going to need to do something about what he's seeing out of Ayud, right? Because Ayud, he reset the count. There's only 2 Apostles up right now. But the Azazels are a big deal. The focus fire can absolutely be massive. And the you know, the crowd control is only going to get more and more intense from here. A lot of Gorgs went down. Each time you see a Muta in production, it's actually 2 Mutas. So at this point, I want to say he's made... I think he's made 5, because I think 2 of them died earlier. All right, some Tetzoricors are out. Some more Lyrilisks are being made. Lyrilisks are very, very good as, like, chaff units in a way of, like, you know, they're like the, you know, a good, not counter to the Madcap, but corollary, where you're building them to occupy that mid-range role. We don't have hardly any static defense over here, so this base is going to be kaput. You could see that Krankendau was considering attacking the area in the bottom right. Can't exactly do that in this situation. Bit of an engagement starting off over here. Where's the surround potential? Looks like he's just going to charge forward. Nice irradiate from the Seraphs. Here come the Mutas to try to focus down individual targets. But remember the Apostles, and remember that the Azazels are here to defensively matrix them. So now the focus fire needs to be surrounded, and we only have 1 Apostle having gone down so far. So the front line is starting to turn over, and the Protathalors are going to get chewed on through. We've got lots of money in the bank here for Krankendau, but he does need to hold on and hold back this tide. Actually, it's not that many units left over, thinking about it. Definitely a lot of units ended up dying on both sides there. But the Shamans deploying in the middle of that fight are a real big deal. And the Apostles, oh my god, Tier 3 is now started. Okay, all right. Data on the way. But yeah, no focus fire onto the Apostles. It can be hard to see them in the ocean of everything else. They probably need a little bit of a increased collision size so that they don't get overlapped on by other units. So I'm clearing my throat a lot, so you know what that means. Another sip of coffee. All right, that was actually 3 sips, because you can donate in increments of 3 if you like what you're seeing. Shameless plug, of course. Yeah, at this stage, we got a lot of Lakizilisks coming. 6 o'clock is not very well saturated. Worker count massively in favor of Aeud. And looks like there was a pause. I would love to have seen Krankendau pinch off some air units like those Mutas and just hit these bottom right bases, right? That's an area where you absolutely can and should use your Mutalisks to your advantage. They can be very good at sniping individual units, diving on in and you know, distracting your opponent, so to speak. Plenty of detection here, so the Lakizilisks are not going to be able to do too much. This feels like a last-ditch moment. Yeah, Krankendau realizes he doesn't necessarily have the economy to keep this up. And if he scouted Tier 3, he would have known that, yeah, he was not favored in this situation. I do think that Aeud stood a good chance of taking that game every, you know, in many, many possible ways. The grinding down was just one such way to do it. That was an interesting series. I think I learned a lot about the role of, like, not individual units, but just like the idea that if you just sit back and play a macro game and you don't harass, you don't like send off small attacks, that's a big feather in your opponent's cap by that point, you know? Then you're just done. You're like, oh man, I can't do a thing. They're just going to scale up the macro and I can't ever leave my base because what if they attack me? You need to find a way to put in, like, you know, in an ideal world, you could send out a bunch of Zethricords or something to heckle the bases. Like, those bases were completely undefended, right? 3 o'clock was defended, but the 5th and 6th bases were undefended. And if you deny those, you're up a base in Krankendau's shoes. He might have more workers than you, but he can't actually use them. And you know, he charged 4th, 12 o'clock to try to shut that down, but there was no base there. That's not where Aeud had expanded to. He had instead taken a much more scary, I would say, risky proposition there. So anyway, I don't know. There's definitely options. I like what Krankendau is trying out. I liked his play with the Broodspawn heavy composition. I feel like there could be more exploration for that, especially if you go heavy Convolvulus. And the Vilgoricors unironically did a lot there. If he had also filtered in more Zeths so that the corpses could be consumed into more and more Broodspawn, that could have also been a good option, because the more Broodspawn there are, the less you know, useful the reclamation is, essentially. So that's pretty interesting. We're going to see how the matchup evolves when some more changes come in. But thank you for joining me, and that will be it for now. So stay tuned tomorrow. We got another video for you.